It is Friday, July 16th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me, as always, is Jared Smola. We are 4 shows into our divisional preview series. You can find the NFC and AFC West episodes, as well as both South divisions, on DraftSharks.com, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you choose to get your podcasts. Of course, on the YouTube channel where you might be watching us right now. Today, it's time to get back to my boy Justin Fields in the NFC North. Before that, though, Jared, we got plenty going on the website as well, including I just wrapped up my main event draft, and I've got a full recap. I was just quickly typing in the rest of the names into that article before we started this show.
You might be the early team. There's a lot of main event teams to be drafted still, but no, yours is looking pretty strong. That's going to be the one I'm gunning for when I do my main event draft next month.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing everybody else's teams. I'm going to post my finished board in the Draft Sharks Discord without reminding everybody which team I am, because I want to see some genuine reactions to what happened in that league. But I'm happy with the way that first draft went, and I'm also happy with the way things have gone in the DS Discord so far.
Yeah, it's bumping. Kevin did his Q&A last night. Spent close to an hour, I think, answering questions completely free. And we have some super smart guys in there. I'm learning a lot from these guys. So really no reason not to jump in that Discord. It's super easy too. I had never done Discord before. I'm old for Discord, I think, but it's super easy to get into, and again, completely free.
Yeah, as soon as my son, who's about to turn 9, saw Discord on my phone or on my computer, I forget which it was, he's like, "Ooh, since you have Discord, can I get Discord now?" It's like, we're going to have to think and talk about this before I'm ready to let you jump in, buddy.
It seems fair. If Dad has it, I think he can have it.
It does seem fair, but I don't even know exactly what Discord means yet. I know the Draft Sharks one is there. I don't know what else I have access to or what else have access to me right now. So I got to learn some more about it before I can decide whether I'm ready to unleash my son. Discord.
I'm sure there are some shady corners of Discord.
Yeah, no doubt. But we'll get away from that. We'll get away from the life lessons. We got plenty more podcasts to discuss life lessons. Maybe that'll be a whole new branch of the Draft Sharks pods. Today, though, we're going to keep going with the branch that has the divisional preview series. And as I mentioned, it's the NFC North, and it starts with the Chicago Bears. And we always start with the relevant coaching changes. There's not really anything here. Matt Nagy heads into his 4th year as the head coach. Bill Lazor heads into his 2nd year as the offensive coordinator. There was no discernible improvement last year over the year before, 21st or worse in yards, total yards for the Bears, 3 straight years now. They went from 9th in scoring to 22nd. Last year, they dropped in DVOA. I'm sorry, they were 9th in their first year under Matt Nagy, then to 29th, then to 22nd in scoring the past 2 years. Last year, they were down in offensive DVOA from 21st to 25th. So, Bill Lazor came in, nothing got better. I'm going to guess that their move up in the first round to get the quarterback we'll talk about in a few minutes had something to do with that.
Yeah, that's sort of been the story in Chicago for a while, is the lack of a quarterback. Hopefully Justin Fields solves that issue. The one thing I found interesting about the Bears last year, they threw it at 62.3% of their offensive plays. That was 6th highest in the NFL. They were only 18th, though, in situation neutral pass rate. So this is a team where, being behind on the scoreboard, I think, elevated their pass rate. So if that changes this season, we could see that come down a bit. I think, when and if Justin Fields gets in there, his ability as a runner could bring that pass rate down too. So that was the one interesting thing I think it's worth keeping in mind when evaluating the Bears heading into 2021.
Yeah, and looking back over Matt Nagy's first 3 seasons, the Bears went 53.8% pass his first season, then up to 61.3, up to 62.3 the past 2 years. Their records in those seasons, 12-4, 8-8, 8-8. So I agree. It seems like they would like to run the ball more, but trailing more often the past 2 years has not helped them to do so. There was a report recently that Matt Nagy wants to get David Montgomery 20 carries a game, but if you read what he said, yeah, because if we're winning more, David Montgomery is going to carry the ball more late in the game. So that's our goal. He didn't say we're going to feed him 20 times a game and see what happens. So obviously they want to win more. That would help them run more. We'll see what happens on that front. Overall, I can't say that I'm expecting the offseason moves to really push things in that way. It's tough to expect a rookie quarterback to shove things more toward the winning side. We'll see. I think for our projection purposes, I expect it to be pretty similar to the past couple of years.
Yeah, I brought them down to 60% pass, down from 62%, which is, still on the higher side. But I don't think this is going to be a, 13-4 football team. So I still think you're gonna get a pass lean here.
And if they do shift to Justin Fields, as you said, it's probably going to look like they're running the ball more just because he's going to take more dropbacks scrambling out of the pocket than Andy Dalton will. But we'll use that to transition to QB notes. Andy Dalton is the guy that they signed for $10 million this year to be their QB1, as they tweeted back in March. But then they drafted the franchise quarterback about a month and a half later. So Matt Nagy keeps saying that Andy Dalton is the starter, that he's going to open the season as the starter, but history says that that's not going to last. The NFL has drafted 58 first-round quarterbacks from 2002 through 2020. On average, the first start for those guys came in game 7.5. The median is game 4. So even the guys like Patrick Mahomes, who sat out all year, drive that average down, and more often guys are starting in the first half of the season. 36 quarterbacks have been drafted in that span among the top 12 in the first round. The average first start there is game 5.35. The median is game 3. So we should expect to see Justin Fields somewhere at least before the middle of the season, probably in the first quarter.
Yeah, I'm with you. I expect him to be in there, by October. I know people will point to Matt Nagy being in Kansas City when Patrick Mahomes sat for, that season under Andy Reid. Alex Smith that year was coming off an 11-win season and a 67% completion rate. It's not a valid comparison. Andy Dalton is not Alex Smith. I know people will laugh. Alex Smith had a pretty solid career, especially in Kansas City. So I don't see, even if Dalton wins this job coming out of training camp, I don't see him or the Bears playing well enough for him to hang on to that spot.
And I'm pretty sure they went to the playoffs that year that Mahomes sat, didn't they? I mean, that's why Alex Smith was sitting out in week 17 and Mahomes got his first start.
Yep, exactly.
So looking at the Bears' schedule, too, 2 of their first 3 games find them going on the road to face the Rams and on the road to face the Browns. So those could be 2 rough outings for Andy Dalton, where if they're 1-2 at that point, it would be tough for me as a coach on the hot seat to not stick Justin Fields into the lineup in week 4.
Yep, with you again. And, I do think Fields has a good chance to be a top 12 quarterback right out of the gate. I believe in him as a passer. He has enough weapons. I won't say great weapons, but Allen Robinson is a great wide receiver. And there are some other pieces in Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet. You have a couple of capable pass catching backs. And then, of course, Fields with the 4.4 speed is going to add value with his legs. Matt Nagy, we've seen him do some, RPO stuff with Mitchell Trubisky. Trubisky actually averaged a little over 21 rushing yards per game in his starts with the Bears. And, he's a solid running quarterback, but Justin Fields has more upside in that department.
Yeah, I mean, Mitchell Trubisky has been a top 12 fantasy quarterback at times under Matt Nagy. So if you get a guy that's way better than Mitchell Trubisky and better in all of those similar areas, I mean, the sky is honestly the limit for Justin Fields here if he gets in there. He's underrated as a passer. We've been over that. He's 99th percentile speed for the position. The receivers are good enough, I think, to complement him here. So it's just a matter of when he gets into the lineup. Obviously, the risk in drafting him is, maybe Matt Nagy stays stubborn and keeps him out of the lineup. Maybe the Bears do win some games early, and it further motivates them to keep Andy Dalton on the field. So the risk is that you don't have that quarterback, whether you're talking about a best ball team or a lineup management team. We'll see. I'm willing to take that risk to a degree, obviously not just like throwing my team away to get Justin Fields on it. But as long as you can manage that risk with Justin Fields as a second quarterback in any format, I think there's a ton of upside to him.
Yeah, I've been drafting him in best ball, and I think he actually has more value when we get to lineup setting leagues, because then you're not, having to deal with that 0 in your best ball lineup. I'm obviously not taking the 0, but it's a spot that's not contributing. Whereas in lineup setting leagues, you can just sit him on your bench if you need to for 3-4 weeks, and then you have him as an option to put in your starting lineup.
Yeah, he is a particularly nice guy to pair with a stud quarterback, though, in a best ball lineup where, if you get somebody like Dak Prescott or Kyler Murray that is going to be starting most weeks, then you stick Justin Fields behind them, and now you've got this, QB1 overall week potential from both spots in your lineup, and you're really hitting the rocket ship emoji.
Yep, totally.
Running back notes, David Montgomery, the receptions more than doubled last year after Tariq Cohen went down. 1.6 per game as a rookie, 3.6 per game last year. He dominated over the final 6 games, like what we mentioned with Jonathan Taylor. Only Derrick Henry scored more fantasy points at that point. 8 total touchdowns for David Montgomery over those final 6 games. Just like with Jonathan Taylor, though, definitely benefited from facing some weak run defenses. Among those final 6, every single one ranked 18th or worse in run defense DVOA. And the 4 games in that span that were not against the Packers found opponents that ranked 24th or worse in that category.
Yeah, all 6 of those teams were bottom 9 in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs on the season. So he had an easier end of season schedule than Jonathan Taylor even. I think that is somewhat baked into his ADP right now. I mean, he's a 4th, 5th rounder in a lot of these drafts. The big question is what his role in the passing game is going to be with Tariq Cohen back. Montgomery averaged 3 targets per game in the first 3 games of the year with Tariq Cohen. That bumped up to 4.9 targets per game without Cohen. It was an 8% target share with Cohen, 12.5% target share without him. Cohen is expected back. There are some reports, a couple weeks ago that, he's still dealing with some issues with that knee. So we'll see about that. We'll see how Cohen performs in the passing game. I mean, he's been so up and down. He was first among running backs in yards per route run in 2018, but sunk to 21st in 2019. Montgomery has been capable in the passing game. I think it's possible that Montgomery, remains a bigger part of the passing game, even alongside Cohen than he was, before Cohen first suffered that injury last season.
I think he should, because Tariq Cohen has been trending in the wrong direction, even in that area. We're going to have to assess his knee during training camp and see how it is heading into the season. But I would expect that we see Montgomery keeping some of it, certainly not all of it. It's also worth noting, though, that even over the first 9 games last year, David Montgomery ranked 14th in PPR points per game on just 2 total touchdowns. So it's not like he went from being a schlub in the first half to tearing it up in the second half. I certainly started draft season being wary of David Montgomery after the huge finish to last year, but then drafters are like, David Montgomery is not that good. I think he started out in round 3. Now he's regularly in round 4. You can even find him in round 5. I mean, he's an easy value, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the floor is almost like 4th round value, I think, just because we know he's going to get that rushing volume. And then, again, if he does keep a role in the passing game anywhere close to what he had last year, then I think you're getting 1-2 rounds of value on him as a 4th or 5th rounder.
And getting Justin Fields in there can certainly help his rushing average too.
Yep.
So Tariq Cohen will watch, Damian Williams behind them. Khalil Herbert is the rookie. I mean, I think we'll have to see how Cohen is through the summer before we can know whether Damian Williams or Khalil Herbert's going to be a thing at all. I think if Cohen's ready to go, not interested in either of the other 2. And even if Cohen's not ready to go, I'm not all that interested.
Yeah, I mean, Herbert, a late round pick, I think, what was he, a 6th rounder? So, he isn't a great bet for an impact this year. Damian Williams, there are other people out there that I think are more optimistic about him than I am. He ended up getting a $1.1 million deal, only $125,000 guaranteed though. So he is cuttable if the Bears want to. Obviously didn't play at all last year. Had some flashes before that with the Chiefs, but never anything sustained. So I think at best Williams is a handcuff to David Montgomery, but I don't think he's going to be a real sap on his fantasy production.
Yeah, not a cuff I would want to make either. Pass catcher notes, Allen Robinson, wide receiver 9 in PPR last year with Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles throwing him the ball. Wide receiver 7 in 2019 with Trubisky plus 1 game of Chase Daniel. Of course, we all remember the 2015 season where he broke out as wide receiver 6 despite having Blake Bortles as his quarterback in Jacksonville. 6th in target share among all wide receivers in the league last season was Allen Robinson. Now he should be getting a quarterback upgrade, even with Andy Dalton versus Nick Foles, Mitchell Trubisky last year. That should be at least a slight upgrade. And then, the ultimate ceiling for Justin Fields is a bigger upgrade over both of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, what's not to like about A-Rob? I've been drafting him a bunch in the back half of round 3 already. Like you said, top 9 wide receiver in 2 straight seasons with crappy quarterback play. Only DeAndre Hopkins has more total targets than Allen Robinson over the past 2 seasons now. That volume should remain. I mean, Darnell Mooney, even if he pops, is not going to be a big volume guy. And, there's really not much else as far as competition beyond that. Allen Robinson's still just 28 in August, so he's still in his prime. He's going to play this year on the franchise tag, which I always like. He's kind of playing for that big next contract. So, yeah, he's been one of my favorite picks in the back half of round 3, anywhere in round 4.
Yeah, kind of a crowded area of the draft, but I do think he stands out as an upside player among the players that you're considering at that time in the draft. Darnell Mooney, as you mentioned, not likely to be a target hog. Played just 32% of the snaps in the opener last year, but then after that, he never dipped below 60% the rest of the way. 74% or more snap share in 9 straight games from week 7 on. 23 deep targets for the year last year. Among 31 wide receivers who saw at least 18 of those, according to PFF, Only Darnell Mooney and A.J. Green fell short of 200 yards on those deep passes. The median for that group was 301 yards. Mooney caught just 4 of the 23 targets in that range for 158, so about half of the median yardage for that group. So again, I think even if Andy Dalton is a little bit better than what he had last year, there's a yardage boost coming. And then Justin Fields definitely can throw the deep ball. They could hook up well in that particular area of the field. That could be a big yardage boost for Darnell Mooney whenever Justin Fields takes over.
Yeah, I think that deep ball is, one of Fields' biggest assets. So he would seem to be a good fit with Darnell Mooney, who was definitely, if you watched Bears games, you probably saw Mooney get missed downfield when he was open. He has that sub 4.4 speed. There was an article from The Athletic, one of the Bears athletic guys recently, that said, Matt Nagy's offense, likes to take shots downfield, but he just kind of hasn't been able to because of the quarterback situation. I think Fields will change that. So I think, Mooney's a guy who definitely should benefit from Fields getting in there for Chicago.
Yeah, I read that too, and it just made me smile to myself like, yeah, they're going to stick with Andy Dalton, who has never been able to throw the deep ball well, over this gorgeous specimen of a deep ball throwing quarterback. I can't imagine this Bears team getting to October and not starting Justin Fields.
Me either.
Anthony Miller is kind of an afterthought at this point, and it seems like he has worked himself to there, but he's still a solid football player. There's a chance that he could be kind of one of those out of nowhere, oh yeah, I remember that guy, and he's catching 4 or 5 balls every week now.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't given up on him as a player. The Bears might have, it sounds like. I mean, he's still on the team as of now. We'll see, when we get to the end of August, if that's the case. Chicago did have the 8th highest percentage of 3+ wide receiver sets last season. So, whoever is that third wide receiver is going to be on the field. So it's a situation worth monitoring, even though, in lineup setting leagues, you're probably not going to be messing with Chicago's third wide receiver. Maybe for best balls, if we know Miller's going to be that guy, he might be worth a look as we get into August here.
Yeah, I mean, he landed 81st among receivers in my main event draft that just wrapped up, for example. So there's absolutely no risk there. The fact that he hasn't been traded yet makes me wonder what the asking price would be from the Bears, because there were lots of rumors on him moving. And the fact that no team would be willing to give up like a day 3 pick, I guess I shouldn't say fact, but yeah, I'm guessing that there is a team out there that would be willing to give a day 3 pick for Anthony Miller. So the fact that that did not happen tells me that the asking price might be higher than that. Maybe the Bears still like him more than we might think.
Yep, could be.
Cole Kmet, I think the last pass catcher, really worth mentioning here. Playing time grew for him late last season, 70% plus snap share from week 10 on, over 80% each of the final 5 games. It was much lower than that in the first half of the season when he was basically barely part of the offense. 15.2% target share from over the final 8 games, starting with week 10. Jimmy Graham over that same span, 8.75% target share. So Graham's still on the team, but they clearly shifted toward Cole Kmet late last season.
Yeah, I mean, the increased playing time was promising. It's what you want to see out of a rookie. The production didn't really follow, though. He averaged just 5.5 PPR points per game over his final 8 games, including that playoff game. That would have been outside the top 40 tight ends. He also, Kmet also didn't fare well in PFF receiving grade and yards per route run. And he's a rookie tight end. I mean, those guys tend to get off to slow starts. Is definitely capable of taking a step forward in his second season. But I mean, again, just the fact that I don't think he showed a whole lot last year, and that Jimmy Graham's just still around. That kind of has me shying away from Kmet, even at a cheap price tag. I mean, he's fine where he's going. He's just not a guy I've really been targeting.
Yeah, that's where I would have him too. I think it's encouraging that his role got as big as it was late in the season. It's encouraging that he's still, kind of new to focusing on football. He was a baseball player primarily when he first got to Notre Dame, and then kind of shifted toward a football focus toward the end of his time there. So there should still be upside on his growth. That's also a reason to hesitate. He's around tight end 20 right now. I don't know the exact ADP at the moment, but in that range, I think he's fine. He's somebody who could become a factor, and he's also somebody who could just not be all that helpful this season.
Yep, exactly. So
who to like among Bears and drafts right now, Jared?
Allen Robinson, again, I've talked about his ADP sitting at 401. I think that's a good spot for him. And then Justin Fields, I mean, quarterback 23 right now in FFPC best ball. There's no one down in that range with the type of upside Justin Fields has, even if you have to, sit on him for the first, few games of the season.
Definitely agree with that. And I think for the first time since he entered the league, I'm going to mention David Montgomery as somebody that I like as a value. RB19 in FFPC, best ball ADP right now. You can find him sliding beyond that in some drafts now. As I said, you can find him in round 5. And I know it's RB dead zone, but if we know that a guy is the clear lead back for his team, and he might even still be the lead or close to the lead pass catching back for his team this year, it's just an easy pick at that point.
And we'll have to do a podcast on this RB dead zone, because all the talk about RB dead zone has pushed all those RB dead zone running backs down like 2 or 3 rounds. And at some point they are valleys. I agree with Montgomery. I mean, he's not exciting. I don't think he's like a screaming value, but I think at RB19, I mean, that again, barring injury, I think that's close to his floor, because he's going to get 230, 250 carries. Even if he catches, 30 balls, that's enough to pay off an RB19 price tag. And then if he does, catch another 40 to 50 balls, then he's, returning a nice profit.
Yeah, and it takes some convincing yourself, but if you're only drafting players that excite you, then you're leaving a lot of value on the board. Who I don't, Damian Williams is the bear that gets drafted in pretty much every draft that I really want no part of at this point.
Yeah, haven't drafted Damian Williams. Again, I haven't drafted Cole Kmet. I have him here at tight end 22. So again, not crazy, but it's, there's 2, 3, 4 guys going behind him that I prefer. So I haven't been drafting much of him. Darnell Mooney's wide receiver 52 in ADP. I need to start getting some more of him. I've just been taking Marvin Jones, Corey Davis ahead of him. But I do want to get some pieces of Mooney, because I definitely see the upside once Fields gets in there.
Yeah, I don't think Mooney is a guy that you want to take every single time in the range where he's going because of the other names that you mentioned, but I do think that he's somebody to mix in there, especially if you are best ball drafting and getting Justin Fields. I think they're a nice value stack where they're going.
Yep, for sure.
Detroit Lions, Jared, tell us about the coaching changes there.
Yeah, brand new staff. Head coach Dan Campbell, he of the knee biting. He's been in the NFL for 11 seasons now, with Miami and New Orleans. Mostly as a tight end coach. He did have a 12-game stint as the Dolphins interim head coach back in 2015. But it's going to be Anthony Lynn running this offense. He's been in the NFL since 2000. He was the Bills offensive coordinator. That was his first coordinating job in 2016. That was a super run-heavy team with Tyrod Taylor under center for Buffalo there. And then Lynn took the Chargers head coaching job over these past 4 seasons now, 2017 to 2020. They were a pass-leaning offense under Lynn. The Chargers were. They finished top 15 in situation-neutral pass rate in 3 of Lynn's 4 seasons there. So he is a former running backs coach too. So I think a lot of people would assume he's like a run kind of guy, but that wasn't necessarily the case with the Chargers.
It's going to be interesting to watch because Anthony Lynn's history has been favorable to running backs, but he's also been a questionable coach in terms of play calling and in-game decisions. The Lions were the 5th most pass-heavy team in the league last year. They've been 60% pass or more every year since 2013. Anthony Lynn, though, his offenses over 5 seasons as an OC or a head coach have averaged 58% pass, so a little bit lower than that. Dan Campbell's 5 years in New Orleans, again, he wasn't the OC or, head coach there, so who knows how much involvement he had in that. But he was an offensive coach. 5 years in New Orleans, averaged 57% pass. They do look stronger in Detroit at running back and on the O-line than they do at quarterback and wide receiver.
Yeah, that's for sure. This is a team where game flow, I think, is going to, sway their run-pass split as well. I would assume they want to be a run-leading offense. So, situation-neutral pass rate, they'll probably be low. But, the Lions have a 5-win over-under in Vegas, which is, right down there with the Texans as the lowest in the league. So game flow is going to push them towards the pass a bit more than they'd like, probably. I went 57.5% pass for the Lions this season, which, again, as you said, would be a pretty big dip from last year.
Yeah, I've got 58-42. I think that if this were a winning team, they would probably like to run the ball they would probably like to pass 53, 54%. I don't think they're going to be a winning team, so I think it will push higher. And if they're terrible, maybe it pushes higher than that. But 58-42 for me for projections. QB notes, Jared, what you got on Jared Goff? Your namesake.
I don't have much to say about the guy. he's I don't even want to call him underrated, but people probably bash him more than they should. He's fine. He's fine, but when you get into, again, what's going to be a bad offense with, one of, if not the worst wide receiver cores in the NFL, and Jared Goff's going to give you no rushing upside, there's no reason for us to talk about him any more for fantasy football. He's at the bottom of our quarterback rankings.
Yeah, I mean, he's noteworthy because all quarterbacks have a home somewhere, but not a whole lot to like here. Did still check in 17th in fantasy points among quarterbacks last year, despite just 20 touchdown passes, but got some help from 4 rushing scores there, got some help from Sean McVay's offense, just 20th in points per game, no high-end games. So there's nothing to get excited about here. He does throw better in the short and intermediate ranges, so maybe that matches up well with what Detroit has in the running backs that we talked about, in TJ Hawkinson, who we'll talk about soon. Doesn't look particularly good for the wide receivers that we'll talk about in a minute. But again, there's the only thing to say about Jared Goff is if you're playing in a super flex or a 2 QB league, he plays quarterback.
Yes.
Running back notes. And, I mean, it's going to be – we'll have to see how much of this backfield is running game and how much of it is passing game, because the guy to like here, if you take out where they're going in drafts, is DeAndre Swift. But the reason to like it is the receiving upside more than the rushing.
I mean, I think Swift and Williams are going to play a big role in this passing game. Again, when we'll get to the Lions wide receivers, but it might be the worst group in the NFL. So I think you're going to see a lot of the targets here going to the running backs and to the tight end position. The big thing in this backfield was, the Anthony Lynn quote, Jamal Williams is my A back, DeAndre Swift, my B back. That freaked everyone out about DeAndre Swift. If you read the quote, he's just describing what types of players they are. Williams, the bigger between the tackles guy, DeAndre Swift, the outside the number space guy. He never said anything about how the touches are going to be distributed. So I think that quote got overblown. Williams is going to be involved for sure. I mean, I think if you ever thought Swift was going to be a 280 carry guy, you were wrong to begin with. So we'll see how the carries are distributed. I think Swift is going to play a big role in this passing game. He was really good as a pass catcher as a rookie last year. 6th most catches per game, 12th most receiving yards per game by a rookie over the last 10 seasons. He was 6th in yards per route run among 37 qualifying running backs. He was 13th among those guys in PFF receiving grade. He was a good pass catcher at Georgia. So, I think that's what you're buying with DeAndre Swift, and we'll have to, see exactly how the carries will be split.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Lynn did also say that he thinks Jamal Williams can do all of the things that are involved in playing running back, and the B back for DeAndre Swift is the get him out in space, work him outside type. The thing, I think that DeAndre Swift is more appropriately priced now. So I think that the quote from Anthony Lynn was probably good in doing that. DeAndre Swift was out of place in round 2. I think you can make a case for him late in round 3. Still not somebody that I'm really gravitating to, because in round 3, I think I still want to know what I'm getting in the guy that I take there. And I look at DeAndre Swift and I can say, yeah, I see the upside, but I don't know what his season looks like. And I can get comfier with that a couple rounds later. But in round 3, I'm looking at him. I'm looking at some other running backs like, say, Miles Sanders, David Montgomery. I know better what their paths look like. Chris Carson in the same range. I definitely like Chris Carson better, especially in the Seattle offense, and the wide receivers we already mentioned with Allen Robinson. So even if I don't want another running back, I'm saying, well, I guess I'll go ahead and take the Bears' number 1 wideout, who's been a top 9 guy recently.
Yeah, that's my thing. I've just been taking running backs in that range mostly. I do, though, if I need a running back, I do like Swift, in the back half of round 3. I agree with you that guys like Carson, Montgomery, they're safer. I just think Swift has a higher ceiling, though, because, he was a good-looking a lot of people had him as the best running back in last year's class. I had him behind Jonathan Taylor, but, he's a guy we all liked coming out. He was an early second-round pick. Again, he flashed as a rookie, even though, the workload was inconsistent from time to time. But I just, I think he has a higher ceiling than the other running backs going in that area.
I don't. I think they're all at least similar on upside. And I think maybe Miles Sanders has the highest ceiling, depending on how things go for everybody.
Could be.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying. I like Swift. I like Jamal Williams better though as a value. Where he's going in these drafts, because I do think, again, he's going to play his role on the ground. Swift's not going to be an 18 carry per game guy. There's going to be plenty left for Williams there. And again, I do think he's going to be involved in the passing game. Not as much as DeAndre Swift, but enough to be a fantasy factor. He caught 25 plus passes in all 4 of his seasons in Green Bay. He was 4th in PFF receiving grade a couple years ago, dropped a bit this past season. He's also one of the better pass blocking backs in the NFL. He's been 1st and 7th in PFF pass blocking grade over the past 2 seasons. So, he's going to be on the field when Detroit needs that. And again, I just think these Lions running backs could combine for like 20-25% of the team's targets just because the wide receiver core is so weak.
Yeah, I would not be at all surprised if they're among the league leaders in running back target share. On to the other pass catcher notes, the guys who are actually meant to just catch passes. Like I said, Jared Goff, better in the short to intermediate range. His deep ball passing has gotten worse over the past couple of years versus the early part of his career. That certainly does not match up well with the play styles of Brashad Perriman or Tyrell Williams, who the team imported this offseason. So I guess the mark in their favor is that they're both going late enough that it doesn't really matter. If they don't work out, then you cut them for something else. But it's not a great situation for optimizing either of those players. You would then maybe turn and say, okay, that makes it good for Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's not the downfield type, and maybe he can be the intermediate successor. My hesitation with that is he's a fourth-round pick. Maybe he's just nothing this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are getting a little crazy with Amon-Ra St. Brown, just, seeing the supposed opportunity that he has in this wide receiver core. And again, I mean, there's a chance he leads these wide receivers in targets, but like you said, fourth-round pick. Over the past 10 seasons, only 2 fourth-round rookie wide receivers have reached even 80 targets. Only 6 over the past 10 years have reached even 50 targets. So it's not a good history if you drop into that fourth round. And again, even if Amon-Ra St. Brown sees 80 targets in that offense, like how much is that really going to do for your fantasy team?
Yeah, I mean, 80 targets in any offense is not attractive. In Detroit, it's certainly not attractive. And I think that this team is going to rank among the league leaders in both running back target share and tight end target share. So there's only going to be a smaller pie remaining for the wideouts. So I think once you get to the point where you're setting lineups, there's not going to be a whole lot to find in Detroit. I do like Tyrell Williams late in a best ball draft because, I mean, even if you're a poor deep ball passer, you're going to hit some of them. And Tyrell Williams is the one guy there that has succeeded in terms of downfield and end zone production.
Yeah, you're actually required to like Tyrell Williams if you're on this podcast. He did get he got a 1 year fully guaranteed $4 million deal. Not a big deal, but he got almost twice as much as Brashad Perriman got. So Detroit was obviously higher on bringing Tyrell Williams into town than they were Perriman.
And of course, the biggest mark in his favor, he's going outside the top 70 at the position. So I'm investing nothing to buy his physical upside. The spot where targets are definitely going to go and the player who matches up with Jared Goff's play style is TJ Hawkinson. He's easy to like, I think, from various standpoints here. Just volume, he already finished last year 5th in PPR points among tight ends, 5th at the position in targets. Then the Lions shed Marvin Jones, Kenny Golladay, Danny Amendola. The top returning wideout for the team is Quintez Cephas at 35 targets last year, 20 catches. And, Quintez Cephas is also somebody to keep in mind if you find yourself eyeing the opportunity for Amon-Ra St. Brown. Maybe he plays behind Quintez Cephas this year. But, that aside for now, there's definitely the target upside for TJ Hawkinson, plus the quarterback style that matches up better with his game than it does with the wideouts on the outside. For me, TJ Hawkinson is the clear number 4 tight end on draft boards this year.
Yeah, he's 4 for me. I think Pitts is close, and I think I have Andrews closer to those guys than you do. But yeah, he is tight end 4 for me, and targets is the main argument in his favor. And Hawkinson's not going to out target Kelsey. He's probably not going to out target Waller. It wouldn't surprise me if he out targets everyone else, including George Kittle. And beyond that, I mean, I'll admit he hasn't looked like an elite player in the NFL so far. I mean, he was an elite prospect coming out. I mean, the Lions took him 8th overall. He had nice production at Iowa. He was an 85th percentile athlete, and he's been good. He just scored the 7th most PPR points by a second-year tight end over the past 10 seasons now. So his career is off to a good start. I still think there's there's better to come.
And Jason Witten has showed us, if nobody else, Jason Witten has showed us that you don't have to be an exciting prospect to produce big time at tight end. TJ Hawkinson could see 35 more targets than Mark Andrews this year, which I think is the big argument for me against him. And then TJ Hawkinson versus Kyle Pitts is just a matter of, third year former first round pick versus first year first round pick.
Yep, I'm with you there.
Who I like among Lions, I mean, Hawkinson's the biggest one. You have to pay up for him at this point, though. FFPC drafts, he is going at the 3-4 turn in ADP. You'll see him going in round 3. You might see him in round 4. I think if you get him available to you in round 4, go ahead and jump on him because even though tight end 4, you wouldn't say that's strong value, overall versus the position. He's a good 2-3 rounds behind the top 3 at that position. So I think that makes it a better value than you might think just by positional ADP.
Yeah, I think Hockenson is fairly valued. As much as I like the guy, he's not someone I have a ton of so far. Again, I don't think he's dropping into like big time value range in a lot of these drafts. He's kind of going where he should. I think he's fine if you take him at ADP. Jamal Williams is my favorite Lion. He's definitely the guy I have the most of. I actually have quite a bit of Jamal Williams. He's a running back 44 in ADP. Again, I think the efficiency might not be pretty in this offense, but I think he's going to get enough volume to pretty easily beat that price tag.
Yes, he's my highest owned Lion. Hockenson was a better value earlier before more people got on him. I do think that as we move to lineup setting, he gets more attractive because he's going to be the guy that I think will get 8+ targets most weeks, and you can comfortably put in your lineup and not have to rely on somebody like Mark Andrews, who's going to go up and down week to week depending on touchdowns more. On the who I don't side, I've already mentioned him. DeAndre Swift is better in round 3. Still not somebody that I'm chasing because I prefer Miles Sanders and Chris Carson.
Yeah, Swift RB16 and FFPC ADP. I think that's exactly where he sits in our ranking. So again, I'm fine with him in the late 3rd round, anywhere in the 4th. Jared Goff is someone I'm just not taking. He's cheap, but there's just no upside. And especially if you're still drafting best ball, you want a chance at those spike weeks. I don't think you're going to get those from Goff in Detroit this year.
Yeah, if he wasn't given spike weeks with the Rams and he wasn't last year, then he's not going to do it with the Lions. On to the Green Bay Packers. Relevant coaching changes front, nothing. 3rd season of Matt LaFleur as the head coach and Nathaniel Hackett as the OC. The offense jumped from 18th in yards and 15th in points in 2019 to 5th and 1st, respectively, last year. 8th in overall offensive DVOA to 1st. The number 1 pass offense in last year in DVOA, 5th best on the ground. They were top 10 in each area the year before. So we were coming off 2019 and saying, these Packers are going to regress because their offense wasn't as good as it seemed by their record. Well, all they did was get more efficient last year on offense. They got better. They're bound for some regression this year, but it's clearly a good offense under Matt LaFleur. Yeah,
big jump in year 2, like you said. Now, I'm going to look into that. I feel like a lot of these offenses, kind of disappoint in their first year with a new play caller, a new head coach, no OC, whatever it is. And then in year 2, everyone's kind of off them and they kind of take that step forward. So that might be something to look into, as far as, potentially undervalued offenses heading into 2021.
Yeah. Run pass split, 59.7% pass in 2019, 55.3% last year. I just split the difference on that. Went with 57.5% for this season, basically just assuming that they're not going to win 13 games every single season. Of course, Things will change if the complicated fella doesn't show up.
Yeah, so I actually looked into this, why their pass rate sunk by about 4.5 percentage points despite winning 13 games each of the last 2 seasons. Their situation neutral pass rate was basically the same both years, 60% situation neutral pass in 2019, 59% last year. They were just leading for more snaps last year. They were leading for 57% of their snaps last year versus just 47% of their snaps in 2019. So I think they'll be closer to that 2019 level this year. So I took them back up to 58% pass this season. And yeah, again, that is assuming that Aaron Rodgers is there.
So that brings us to QB notes, and it's complicated. The fact that Aaron Rodgers has not been traded to this point leaves me expecting that he will not be traded. I'm going to assume he shows up because you leave that money and there aren't that many seasons left for him. So obviously I don't know how he feels about his career. Maybe he's ready to call it quits. Maybe I don't know how important the issues are to him right now. I'm assuming that he's going to show up. So I'm happy to take the discount on the peripheral guys, not peripheral, but his number 1 wide receiver and his number 1 running back here. Rodgers himself is due for some regression. Career high and league-leading completion rate last year. Career high league-leading 48 touchdown passes. Career high and league-leading touchdown rate, 9.1%. That is definitely coming down. 4.2%, 4.6% the previous 2 years. The median touchdown rate for him as a starter has been 5.9% for his career. So I would expect at least something down in that range. Last year also presented his highest yards per attempt since 2014, second best passer rating, and the best QBR of his career.
Yeah, if you give him his career TD rate entering last year, he would have thrown only 32 touchdowns and he would have dropped to quarterback 11 in fantasy points. Now, you mentioned all his career highs he set last year. He also set a career high in PFF grade. So, by most measures, it was his best season as a pro, which is crazy to think about considering how good he's been for so long and how old he was last season. But man, I mean, Rodgers, he's been a top 2 fantasy quarterback now in 8 of his 13 seasons as a starter. And 2 of the seasons he wasn't was when he missed a whole bunch of time. So he's been such a steady fantasy producer for so long. He's a guy where you have to worry about the age, but I don't know if he shows up in August. I think he definitely belongs right in that 7, 8, 9 territory among quarterbacks.
He's bound for regression just by luck and just by the fact that he's older and he's missing some offseason workouts, but that's being baked into his ADP even before the whole controversy bubbled to the surface. He was going close to the bottom of the top 12. I think it started sinking as we got through draft season. People are better at recognizing where regression is coming. So I think that Aaron Rodgers is appropriately priced at the bottom of the top 12. And I think as long as he stays in that range, he certainly will make sense for fantasy drafting throughout the summer.
Yeah, I think he's fine where he's going. I prefer Jalen Hurts and Tom Brady for sure. And at this point, I'm probably even taking Stafford over Rodgers, at least until Rodgers shows up. So, I haven't been drafting a ton of Rodgers.
Running back notes, Aaron Jones had the touchdown regression last year that we all expected, but still scored 11 total touchdowns, RB5 in PPR in just 14 games. Saw just 50% of the team carries over his 16 contests, including the playoffs. We talked to TJ Hernandez the other night about that, said that Aaron Jones is somebody up in those early rounds that makes him nervous on workload, but that was down from 59% in 2019. So a better rushing workload there. Jamal Williams is gone. The target share climbed for Aaron Jones last year from 11.7% in 2019 to 13.3%. So overall, for me, I'm not worried about Aaron Jones's workload share, especially because the biggest challenge to his targets has left town, and the guy who has taken some red zone work from him over the past couple of years, Jamal Williams, is gone.
Yeah, I'm not scared at all to draft Aaron Jones anywhere around 2. I think he belongs like at the 1-2 turn. I mean, the risk is obviously what happens if Rodgers isn't there, but we could talk about if that becomes the case. I don't think it would hurt him a ton because I think it might grow his volume. His efficiency would probably drop a bit, but assuming Rodgers is there, again, I think he belongs at around the 1-2 turn. He's been top 15 in the NFL in carries in each of the last 2 seasons, despite missing some time. I think he'll stay at least in that range. I don't think AJ Dillon's going to carry more than Jamal Williams was the past couple seasons. And I think Aaron Jones' target share should definitely grow because AJ Dillon is not going to play the same role in the passing game that Jamal Williams did. So, and then, you talk about the touchdown thing. The reason his touchdowns dropped last year is because Green Bay was just throwing it so much more often inside the 5-yard line. I mean, if you watch Packers games, they were inside the 5. It was Rodgers to Adams like every time. So, maybe that shifts back in Jones's favor. He's shown us, he has the upside to score 15 plus times.
Yeah, and if we expect this offense to remain efficient, and I think we do, even with regression, that's bound to balance out some, where it's coming down from 48 passing touchdowns, but still probably staying on the positive side versus league average in total touchdowns. So that should help Aaron Jones from a scoring standpoint. We've alluded to the backfield changes behind him or next to him, depending on how you want to look at it. Jamal Williams was allowed to walk in free agency, sign with the Lions. A.J. Dillon is the new number 2. Different player type than Jamal Williams, big guy, fast for his size, no proven receiving ability. I mean, if you watch some Packers tape, you can see them trying to run him on stuff like wheel routes. So he will be involved in the passing game to some degree, but this is a guy that caught 21 total passes across 3 years as a workhorse back at Boston College. So expecting significant receiving from A.J. Dillon this year, I think would be a mistake.
Yeah, definitely a mistake. And even on the ground, I mean, so Jamal Williams averaged 6.8 carries per game over the past 2 seasons when he was healthy alongside Aaron Jones. I think that's about a fair projection for A.J. Dillon this season. The question for me is, will he steal goal line carries from Aaron Jones? Because, Dillon is that big back. I'm kind of leaning no, though, because, Jones has been effective at the goal line. But that's something I'll be looking for in training camp.
Especially for a team that likes to throw down in that range, though, is Aaron Jones is both a rushing and receiving option down there. If you put in A.J. Dillon, you start giving him a bigger share of those goal line touches. You're telegraphing what you're going to do when he's in the game. So he'll be involved, obviously, but I would be surprised if the Packers say, you're our new goal line back.
Yeah, I mean, so to me, if we don't think he's going to play a big role in the passing game and he's not going to be the goal line back, to me, Dillon's just a handcuff. I don't think he's going to have any standalone value when Aaron Jones is healthy.
Yeah, I think that there's the possibility for him to have some standalone value, but I would guess that it will be less than Jamal Williams, which was not strong last year. Behind them, Kylan Hills, the rookie, he was a good pass catcher at the end of his college career. Didn't do it for a whole lot of time, though, so we'll have to see. I think it's worth watching during camp what the Packers think of him. If we start getting some buzz about them liking him in the passing game, maybe there's some work available for him. Maybe that takes away from A.J. Dillon. Until then, I mean, I think we're basically looking at this as a two-back system.
I think so, unfortunately. I don't think anything made me more sad during this year's draft than Kylan Hill dropping to the 7th round. I'm still intrigued by, him when you look at the size and the pass-catching ability, but 7th rounder, he's obviously a long shot.
Yeah. Kylan Hill, Dexter Williams is the other guy back there. He spent most of last year on the practice squad. So again, we're looking at A.J. Dillon, we're looking at Aaron Jones, and everybody else. You kind of will see if they become a thing. Pass catcher notes: Devontae Adams, and then everybody else way behind him. He led the league at 28.3% target share last year, despite missing 2 games. It was 33% over his 15 full games, including the playoffs. 30% in 2019. So this guy is a target hog.
Yeah, 10.6 targets per game last year, 10.6 targets per game in 2019, 11.3 targets per game in 2018. So, he's the best volume bet in the NFL, assuming Aaron Rodgers is back. Obviously, Adams with the 18 touchdowns last year, that, was a big part of his fantasy production. It was actually the 3rd most receiving touchdowns in NFL history. That's obviously coming down, but I mean, his usage near the end zone was crazy and almost makes you want to say, like, the touchdowns aren't going to come down by a lot. He had 23 red zone targets. That was 5 more than any other player in the NFL. He had 20 targets inside the 10-yard line. That was 6 more than any other player in the NFL. So, the usage, was a big part of that, 18 receiving touchdowns. It wasn't as fluky as you might think.
He can cut his touchdowns in half and still be Michael Thomas is the thing. There's regression coming, but don't worry about it. And the Aaron Rodgers uncertainty right now is pushing Devontae Adams into round 2. If Aaron Rodgers comes back, and it's certainly what I would bet on at this point, Devontae Adams, I think, is going to look like a ridiculous value in round 2.
Where would you draft him if we know Rodgers is not playing this season?
If we know he's not playing, I still think he's a late round 2 pick because he's still going to be the 30% target guy for Jordan Love. And somebody looked back at non-Aaron Rodgers games for Devontae Adams and still found him to be a productive wide receiver 1 for the Packers.
I got those. It was 7 games in 2017 with Brett Hundley. Like, I know we don't like Jordan Love, but I don't think he's going to be worse than Brett Hundley. And in those 7 games, Adams averaged 8.7 targets, 5.9 catches, 70 yards, and 0.6 touchdowns. That's like a borderline wide receiver 1, I would think. I think, late 2nd, early 3rd, maybe mid 3rd round, like, Michael Thomas, Keenan Allen kind of territory, I think is where Adams would be dropping to if Rodgers was definitely out for the year.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, he's a guy that I would look at late in round 2 and think he belongs here, but this other guy's here, so I'll take this other guy and see what happens.
Yeah, I would take Justin Jefferson over Devontae Adams if there's no Rodgers, but
let's hope that we at least find out for sure what's going to happen either way before we're into those, really high pressure August drafts. But it'll be interesting to see where Devontae Adams goes if we still don't know about Aaron Rodgers come like August 10th.
Definitely.
Behind Devontae Adams, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, just 54th among wideouts in PPR scoring last year, tied for 66th at the position in targets. Allen Lazard actually beat him in targets in their 12 shared games, 14.9% to 12.2% target share for those 2 guys. The big addition is 3rd-round pick Amari Rodgers, who looks like a slot receiver, looks like a bigger threat to Allen Lazard than he does to MVS.
Yes, that was my takeaway here too. Both kind of in play style, and Lazard's much bigger than Rodgers, but I think they're similar in play style. They're both primary slot guys. I mean, Lazard played 52% of his snaps in the slot last year, so he was moving in and out. But I do think MVS just gives this wide receiver core something that the rest of the guys don't in that deep speed. So I think MVS is kind of the other outside wide receiver along with Devontae Adams, and it's going to be Lazard and Amari Rodgers kind of battling for that primary slot role. MVS is a guy, I don't want anything to do with him in lineup setting leagues, but I've actually been taking him a decent amount in best balls. He had 5 games of 17 plus PPR points last year. He does have those spike weeks.
Yeah, I think he's fine where he's going in a best ball draft. I want no part of him if I have to set a lineup because you just can't bet on what he's going to do unless it's a deep league and you stick him in your lineup as a fourth receiver and you're okay with taking zeros. Robert Tonyan is the other pass catcher to talk about here. Obvious regression candidate, just like Aaron Rodgers, and even more so. 88% catch rate last year, 21% touchdown rate when you're looking at touchdowns versus receptions. Drafters, though, have been treating that appropriately. Like I said, we've all gotten better at recognizing regression and baking it into ADPs. He does seem like he's rebounded, though, in ADP, and rebounded in a negative way, I would say, because there was a stretch where Robert Tonyan was going tight end 14, tight end 15, and there it's like, okay, fine. If you're going to be a red zone option for Aaron Rodgers and one of the primary ones, I'll go ahead and take you right there. Now he's up to tight end 12 in FFPC drafting, tight end 10 in best ball 10. So that's a little bit too rich for me.
Yeah, me too. Tight end 15 is a spot I'd consider him. I haven't, been able to get him there yet. Talk about Adams' red zone role kind of matching the touchdowns. Robert Tonyan's red zone role did not match his touchdowns. He tied for the league lead among tight ends with those 11 touchdowns. He was just 16th among tight ends in red zone targets. He was just 12th among tight ends in end zone targets. So it was just a case of him being super efficient on those looks that he got. You can't expect that to continue even with Aaron Rodgers. The total volume, he was just 24th among tight ends in total targets, and his role didn't grow over the course of the season. If you just look at Green Bay's last 5 games, including their playoffs, he averaged just 3 targets per game in those 5 games. So, his volume is just going to have to grow quite significantly for him to, pay off his ADP right now.
Jay Sternberger has disappointed, but we are heading into just his 3rd season. So there's a chance. I'm not going to say there's a chance he passes Tonyan this year, although I guess that's a range of outcomes kind of thing. But there's certainly a chance that he cuts into Robert Tonyan's role.
A chance. I'll give you that.
Who do you like among these Packers in drafts right now?
Aaron Jones is my favorite. I have him at RB 14 in ADP going in the mid 2nd round. Again, to me, that's 5-6 picks lower than he should be going. And maybe some of the Aaron Rodgers stuff is baked in, but even if Rodgers isn't in Green Bay, I think Aaron Jones should be a mid 2nd round pick like he's going right now. So I kind of think you're just getting all upside at this point. Kind of the same story with Devontae Adams. He's going in the same range in the middle of the second. I like him there. And then again, Marquez Valdes-Scantling in best ball leagues. He has a 23rd round ADP and FFPC best balls. I just think, for that format, he gives you more weekly upside than most of the other receivers going in that territory.
I think I'd probably take Aaron Jones more round 3 if there's no Aaron Rodgers there, because I think the touchdown efficiency is coming way down if it goes from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. But I agree that I like him there because I'm assuming that Aaron Rodgers is going to play. And the depressed ADP makes Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams an attractive best ball stack for me, I think. Because if you knew right now that Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams were playing this season, they would probably be something like QB8 and wide receiver 1. Devontae Adams would be going middle of round 1, and he'd be the kind of guy that you felt like you were stealing if you got him at 11th overall. So if you can take him in round 2, you can get Aaron Rodgers as maybe the 12th quarterback off the board. There's lots of value in pairing those guys right now.
Yeah, if you're doing a bunch of these best ball drafts, I think you definitely want to mix in some Packer stacks at these prices.
Who do you dislike among Green Bay players?
AJ Dillon, I have not been drafting. He's at RB 42. He's going ahead of Jamal Williams, ahead of Darrell Henderson. I definitely prefer those 2 guys. I like Latavius Murray, at least just as much as Dillon. He's going later. Naheem Hines going later than AJ Dillon. So haven't been drafting Dillon, and then again haven't been drafting Robert Tonyan at his tight end 12 ADP on FFPC.
I think A.J. Dillon's extremely similar to Latavius Murray in that they're both sharing backfields with, pass run hybrids who are better than they are and have that handcuff upside, plus, some slight standalone value.
Yeah, again, I think they're similar in value. Murray's just going later. And I guess I think there's just I think Murray might give you a couple extra usable weeks in best ball than Dillon just because he at least does a bit in the passing game.
Yeah, we'll see. Dillon's somebody that I'm mixing in, certainly not a specific target for me. The guys that I'm not drafting are really the passing game pieces beyond Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. I'm not going overrate on Rodgers, but behind that, I'm not sure if I've drafted any MVS. Not interested in Amari Rodgers, not interested in Allen Lazard. And I might have taken like a share or 2 of Tonyan at some point when he was in the mid-teens among tight ends.
That's fair.
On to the Minnesota Vikings. Jared, what do we have on the coaching front there?
So head coach Mike Zimmer back for his 8th season, but a change at offensive coordinator here. We have Gary Kubiak out and his son Clint Kubiak in. I spent way too much time digging into Clint Kubiak yesterday morning. Interesting path, though. Like, I had kind of assumed he had just been riding his dad's coattails like around the NFL. That really hasn't been the case. He started as an assistant coach at Texas A&M, actually crossed paths there with Cliff Kingsbury for, I think it was just a year. Then he was the Vikings assistant coach in 2013 and 2014, but that was under offensive coordinators Bill Musgrave and Norv Turner. Kevin Stefanski, by the way, was also there, I believe, as Minnesota's quarterbacks coach. And then Kubiak later, worked under Stefanski in 2019 in Minnesota. So, I think Stefanski might have as much influence here as Gary Kubiak does on Clint, but, a guy who hasn't called plays at the NFL level. So we're kind of going in blind here looking at the Vikings offense. I expect it to, not divert too much from what we saw in Minnesota last season.
Yeah, of course, Gary Kubiak was also on the staff of those 2019 Vikings as an assistant head coach. I'm glad that Clint Kubiak and Cliff Kingsbury have not locked up, because the double Ks together, I think, might rip a hole in the time-space continuum. There's history with Clint Kubiak with the Vikings. We know that Mike Zimmer gets pissed off if you don't run the ball enough. So I think we should expect, based on that, based on Clint being Gary Kubiak's son and Gary Kubiak offenses being run-friendly historically, I think we should assume that the Minnesota Vikings are going to stay pretty similar to what they've been in recent years offensively.
Yep, I think so. They were 54.3% pass last year. That was 27th in the NFL. They were actually 30th in situation neutral pass rate. I did bring them up a tad to 56%. That's still definitely in the bottom half of the league. But I mean, you did just have Justin Jefferson set the rookie record for receiving yards. So I think I don't think they're going to be a top 5 run heavy team. I have them moving a bit more towards the pass this season.
I stuck with 54-46 from last year because I think that they'll be a better team than last year, so they'll be able to play from ahead more often. They've got guys healthier and back from opt-outs on defense. They've added some pieces there, so I think the defense will be much better. I think overall it'll be a better team, again, that's playing with more leads. So 54-46, my split for the pass run for projections. QB notes, Jared, what do you got on Kirk Cousins, who I feel like you like him better this year than you ever have before?
Why did I get this title as a Kirk Cousins hater?
I think if anybody listens back to the history of the podcast, they could chart it pretty clearly.
I think early last year I was against him because the volume was so low. But he ended up having a really nice season. He was quarterback 11 in fantasy points. He had the 10th most quarterback 1 week, so he was pretty reliable. From a season long lineup setting perspective. And his second half of the season was much more productive than his first half. So again, his attempts went from 26.1 per game over the first 8 weeks up to 38.4. over the final 8 games. He averaged 301 yards and 2.5 touchdowns per game over those final 8. He was quarterback 3 in fantasy points over that stretch. And again, this is another reason I took their pass rate up a little bit, is they were 49% pass in neutral situations in those first 8 games, up to 59% pass in neutral situations over the final 8. So, they're, again, and I think it has to do with Justin Jefferson. They saw this guy producing like he was, and they did lean more towards the pass over the second half.
You would like to think so. You'd like to think that they would react to having this stud rookie wideout, plus, some talent at the tight end position. So wouldn't be surprised if we get a little bit more passing volume here. Kirk Cousins, been the starter now for 3 seasons, 8th in the league in touchdown rate over that span, 13th in yards per pass attempt, 9th among quarterbacks in total fantasy points, but drops to 17th in points per game. Low volume overall, up from 24th in pass attempts in 2019 to 15th last season overall. We'll see if the second half of last year trends into this year. As you mentioned, though, the Vikings' 3rd lowest situation neutral early down pass rate last year. So I think that we should plan on a little bit more passing volume. As you said previously, though, I don't think it's going to be a whole lot more. How much of an effect that has on Kirk Cousins could be mitigated by him having good wideouts and being efficient when he does throw the ball.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get a top 5 season out of Kirk Cousins, but I also think, that's baked into his ADP, and I do think he's a bit undervalued where he's going. So he is a guy I've been drafting a decent amount of.
Yeah, if I could see past Justin Fields, I'd probably have more Kirk Cousins at this point. Running back notes, Dalvin Cook, third largest carry share in the league last year, and he missed 2.5 games. 73.6% share in his 14 games. That would have been highest in the league, even higher than Derrick Henry for the season. Target share down from 16% to 12.3%, but that number even still would have been good for fifth at the position over the full season last year. So Dalvin Cook is one of the biggest workhorses in the league.
He definitely is. And per your running back scoring review article, top 24 finish in all 14 of his games last season. He also led all running backs with 6 finishes inside the top 5. So, high floor, high ceiling. The only concern is the injury stuff, and I'm not going to worry about that. Most running backs are injury risks, but, when Cook is on the field, he is, likely only behind Christian McCaffrey as far as at least, PPR scoring this season.
Yeah, he's not Will Fuller on the injury front. He's not missing 5+ games to hamstring injuries every year. So don't skip on Dalvin Cook because of the injury risk. For me, he's the clear number 2 running back, and it's basically been a lock every time I get the second pick in a draft to this point. Alexander Mattison behind him, a strict handcuff, like not even up to the level of Latavius Murray where there might be some standalone value. And that, to me, makes Alexander Mattison a huge no thanks whether I drafted Dalvin Cook or not.
Yep, me too. And even last year, he got those 2 games with Cook sideline, and he came through big in, I think it was week 17, right? Yeah, against the Lions, 95 yards and a score on the ground, 50 yards and a score receiving. But then the other game, Cook missed. Madison killed you. He carried 10 times for 26 yards and only caught 1 pass. So, he's not even proven as a handcuff if Cook does miss time. Amir Abdul is back. They added Kene Nwangwu. It's still Madison's job probably, but at least a situation to watch this summer.
Yeah, Madison is the poster boy for why you should not bother drafting handcuff running backs. Sure, he'll make sense at some point, but Dalvin Cook goes down. It's not Dalvin Cook 2.0 when Alexander Mattison takes the field. You can look at the second half of that Seattle game. I think he had a good game there where Dalvin Cook left that one early. If you want to find spots where it makes sense, you can find the information to support that. But overall, it just doesn't. He's not Dalvin Cook. He's not going to replace the production when Dalvin Cook goes down.
Yep.
Pass catcher notes, historic season for Justin Jefferson. So does that make him a regression candidate?
You have all the good notes on Jefferson, as far as the touchdown potential. I'll let you handle those. But yeah, he finished top 4 across fantasy scoring formats last season. And that was despite not doing much the first 2 weeks when he was still a part-time player. So just insanely good season for Justin Jefferson. I'll let you take it away with some of the touchdown stuff.
Yeah, I'm not going to give away all of it right here because it's in his player profile on draftsharks.com. It's in the Justin Jefferson video that you can find on our YouTube and elsewhere. So it's all there. There's some regression in that he was so good and efficient last year that maybe it happens this year. But there's also still some upside because Justin Jefferson did not max out his touchdown potential last year. First of all, he and Adam Thielen both got plenty of targets. They both ranked top 20 in target share, even though Adam Thielen missed a couple games. Jefferson checked in 7th among all wide receivers in target share last year. Despite not being a starter for the Vikings until week 3, he beat Thielen 25% to 22% in target share in their shared games after he became the starter in week 3. So he's already the target leader for this team that even though it's a low volume passing offense, it's a concentrated passing offense. The targets are going to these guys and very few are going to anyone else in the wide receiver core. Now he gets the full season after doing that rookie year damage in basically just 14 games. And the most significant positive regression potential is in his touchdown numbers. Adam Thielen saw a bunch of red zone and a bunch of end zone targets last year, scored on a lot of them at a high rate. Justin Jefferson saw a decent amount of work down there, scored at a relatively low rate. Again, you can go to his player profile on our site. You can go to the Justin Jefferson video, but basically, unless he or the offense crash, I think Justin Jefferson will at least be fine and similar in terms of the work he gets this year, and there's big upside in his touchdown potential.
Yep, I'm in on Jefferson, at the end of round 2 and anywhere in round 3. Let's go to Thielen, who you mentioned there. 14 touchdowns on 74 catches, obviously in for some regression there. That's a 19% touchdown rate. And Thielen's always been a higher than average touchdown rate guy. He scored on 10.5% of his catches over his previous 2 seasons with Kirk Cousins. That's like 2.5 percentage points above the league average. So there's some touchdown regression coming there. Like Devontae Adams, though, Thielen's usage around the end zone was crazy last season. He led the NFL with 20 end zone targets. He was 11th in targets inside the red zone. So I still think you can project him, to score at an above average rate. And yeah, Justin Jefferson is, he emerged as Minnesota's number 1 wide receiver last season. He's going to continue to be the number 1 receiver this season, but still a 21.5% target share for Adam Thielen, even, when Justin Jefferson, broke out over the final 14 games of last season. So he's not an exciting guy to draft, but I still think he's actually a bit undervalued in fantasy drafts at ADP right now.
Yeah, there's definite obvious regression coming to the touchdowns this year, even if he stays as involved in the red zone, because he just scored on such a high percentage of his end zone targets. But that's baked in. He's going wide receiver 25. And I mentioned it, but the third wide receiver here is Chad Beebe, who got 30 targets last year. So it's Adam Thielen, it's Justin Jefferson, and then it's like, we'll throw a few balls to the other guys. So at wide receiver 25, there's plenty of upside, as Thielen has already showed us multiple times.
Yep, I think he's 19th or 20th in our wide receiver rankings. So
at tight end, Kyle Rudolph is gone. Irv Smith and Tyler Conklin remain. I haven't been as high on Irv Smith, basically pretty much at any point since he entered the league as you are, but it has to help him that Kyle Rudolph is gone, right?
Definitely. I mean, if you ask Mike Zimmer, he's going to tell you that it's going to help Tyler Conklin more than Irv Smith. That was a big Zimmer quote from probably a month ago now. That, by the way, has sunk Irv Smith's ADP. He is tight end 13 on FFPC now. I think he was like tight end 10 a month or two ago. So I was actually not drafting much of him, when he was kind of at his peak price. I like him, at tight end 13 now. His production didn't really make a big jump from year 1 to year 2, but he did improve in yards per target and yards per route run in Pro Football Focus receiving grade. Remember, he entered the league as a super young prospect. So, I think a promising first 2 seasons, definitely his biggest opportunity yet with Kyle Rudolph gone. So, again, at a borderline tight end 1 price tag, I think Irv Smith makes sense in drafts right now.
The Mike Zimmer quote that you mentioned is from June via ESPN's Courtney Cronin. When Zimmer was asked about Smith's role growing now that Kyle Rudolph is gone, Zimmer said, quote, "I think it's a bigger role for Tyler Conklin. He's kind of emerged as a guy that's moving upward. And with those two guys, we have a lot of weapons there. Irv always has been able to do what he's been able to do, whether Kyle was here or not." So to me, that says Irv Smith's role might not grow this year versus what it was the past 2 years. I think in his third season, we should expect, some sort of ascension, whether he's more efficient or whatever he does better. He certainly has a higher ceiling than Tyler Conklin. Beat Conklin in average depth of target last year, 8.9 yards to 4.2. So, doubles him there. And that's an improvement over what Irv Smith had his first year, where his ADOT was shorter than Kyle Rudolph's, and I believe it was short of 6 yards that year. So they at least moved Irv Smith's targets further downfield last year. And I agree, at tight end 13, his expectations are not out of control. It's an okay ADP. Vikings tight ends, though, last year ranked 25th, 34th, 43rd in PPR points per game. Collectively, the group 17th in PPR points at tight end last year, 13th in 2019, 17th in 2018. That's Kirk Cousins' 3 seasons as the starter. So, overall, I'm not going to say that Irv Smith's a bad pick at tight end 13, but it's just not a situation that intrigues me when I think there are other guys in that range that have higher ceilings.
What about Tyler Conklin? You taking any of him super late?
I haven't, just because we get to that point and I'm taking guys like Mo Alley Cox and Chris Herndon.
Yeah, I prefer Mo Alley Cox. I don't know. I'm kind of jumping ship on Herndon after what sounded like a rough spring. I have taken Conklin a few times. Definitely best ball only. I think season long he's not going to be an option for you without an Irv Smith injury. But I think late in best ball, especially 28 round FFPC drafts. He out targeted Irv Smith last year, 21-20 over those 4 games that Kyle Rudolph missed, and even the pass routes were pretty close. It was 118 routes for Irv Smith to 106 for Tyler Conklin. So. And again, you talk about the fact that there's no number 3 wide receiver here. I think we are going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets out of the Vikings. So, Conklin should be on the field plenty alongside Irv Smith.
Yeah, and I can see Conklin in that late range at tight end, but there are just so many players available. Even if the 2 that I mentioned aren't guys that you like, I mean, I can get Blake Jarwin as a third tight end at tight end 20. There are other players who are eluding my grasp right now, but it's
OJ Howard. OJ Howard's a guy I've been taking late now.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can get down there. You can be like, oh, yeah, there's that guy, there's that guy, there's that guy. I mean, Eric Ebron is outside of the top 20 at tight end at this point. So there are so many names to pick from when you get into that range for a third tight end.
Yep, that's fair.
Who do you like among Vikings in drafts?
Most of them, honestly. Again, I mean, none are like screaming valleys, but I think they're all guys I'll consider at ADP, and definitely if they drop beyond ADP. I mean, Kirk Cousins at quarterback 16 on FFPC. He's actually quarterback 19 on Underdog, so that's probably the spot to target Kirk Cousins. Adam Thielen, probably the biggest value, I think. Again, like you said, wide receiver 25 on FFPC, wide receiver 23 on Underdog, and then Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson, I think are going where they should be, and I will take Cook at 2, and I will take Jefferson, around the 2-3 turn.
Yes, Dalvin Cook and the top 2 wideouts are my favorite Vikings. Dalvin Cook is an auto pick for me at 2. I've tried to convince myself to not take him every single time, but it hasn't worked yet, so I need to build a better case for it. I don't think any of them are truly underrated. Even Thielen at wide receiver 25, I don't think he's really significantly underrated. We do have him projected higher than that, and his ceiling is definitely higher than that. But I think it's an appropriate range, but he's an attractive player at that point. I definitely have been trying to mix in shares of him. On the who I don't side, nobody I truly dislike, but Irv Smith's the one guy that I really haven't been drafting much. And like I said, I don't see the ceiling potential on either him or Tyler Conklin unless the other one goes down.
Yeah, Madison to me is the only dislike on the Vikings. Again, I'm not taking him, especially in best ball when he's just not going to help you at all without Cook going down. Yeah,
Madison is the zero share for me player. Probably I dislike him so much I didn't even think about him when I was doing this category.
Ouch.
That's going to do it for this NFC North edition of the podcast. Head over to draftsharks.com now. You can see full projections and profiles for each of the players that we addressed in this episode, plus everyone else that will factor into your fantasy drafts. Check out our podcast from Wednesday night with TJ Hernandez from 4 for 4. You can find that on our site, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can always find us on Twitter, as well as the free Draft Sharks Discord. So jump in there, send us your questions, show us your teams, talk to us about what you got going on. For Jared Smola and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schauf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.